1948. A bedroom in a small house in Akron, Ohio. A woman opens her wardrobe on a Sunday evening. Inside, 12 garments hang in precise order. 2 house dresses, a wool skirt, a cotton blouse, a navy crepe dress for church, a wool coat, 2 aprons, a slip, a cardigan, a pair of pressed trousers belonging to her husband that she has just returned from the ironing board. Every garment is clean, pressed, and in its place. The navy crepe dress she is wearing to church tomorrow she bought in 1941. It is 1948 and the dress still looks new. Not nearly new. Not good for its age. New. She has worn it to church every Sunday for 7 years, and it looks as though it has never been worn at all. She did not buy a new dress because she did not need one. These are 13 clothing care tricks that were standard practice in American homes for the better part of the 20th century. Every one of them worked. Every one cost almost nothing, and every one was built on a belief the clothing industry has spent 70 years trying to eliminate, that a garment worth buying is worth keeping, and that keeping it is a skill worth learning. Now, before we dive in, tap that subscribe button. You will not want to miss what is coming next. Number 13. Airing instead of washing. The rule that extended the life of every garment. She did not wash her clothes after every wearing. Not the wool skirt, not the crepe dress, not the cardigan or the tweed jacket or the good blouse she wore to the church social. She aired them. When she came home and changed out of her good clothes, she hung them on a hanger, on the back of a chair pulled near the open window, on the clothesline in the shade, and she left them for several hours, sometimes overnight. The fresh air pulled the body heat and the faint moisture from the fibers. By morning, the garment was refreshed, the fibers had relaxed back to their natural position, and the garment was ready to be worn again. Washing is the most destructive thing you can do to a fabric. Every cycle agitates the fibers, strips surface oils, contracts and stresses the fiber structure. Every wash is a small act of destruction, necessary when the garment is soiled, unnecessary when it is not. Airing a garment after wearing added nothing to her time and cost nothing at all. It extended the life of every piece she owned by a factor she never calculated, but that showed up plainly in a wardrobe where dresses bought in the early 1940s were still in weekly rotation in 1955. Number 12. The clothes brush. 2 minutes after every wearing that changed everything. A natural bristle clothes brush. Oval, wooden handle, boar bristle or horsehair, kept on the shelf inside the wardrobe or on the vanity. After removing a wool skirt or a tweed jacket or a wool coat, before hanging it to air, she brushed it. Every time. The brush moved in the direction of the nap, always with the nap, never against, lifting the surface fibers and with them the dust, the dried skin cells, the fine particles of street dirt that had settled into the weave during the day. The dirt that did not get brushed out today became the dirt that worked deeper into the fiber tomorrow, and the embedded stain the week after that. A good clothes brush cost 50 cents in 1950 and lasted a lifetime. The boar bristle was firm enough to lift surface debris without abrading the fiber beneath. The motion was short and deliberate, section by section, the hand moving the brush from the collar down toward the hem. Lapels and cuffs received extra attention because they caught more air and more contact. The brush also raised the nap of flattened wool, restoring the slight texture that made a quality fabric look alive rather than worn flat. 2 minutes, every time. A garment brushed after every wearing could go weeks between washings without looking anything other than perfectly kept. She did not think of it as maintenance. She thought of it as respect. For the garment, for what it cost, for the woman who would be seen in it the following morning. Number 11. Salt in the first wash, the trick that locked color in permanently. A new colored garment, a red cotton blouse, a dark blue dress, a printed house dress in yellow and green, went into its first wash not with detergent, but with a cup of plain table salt dissolved in cold water. The garment soaked for 30 minutes, then it was rinsed and washed normally. After that first salt soak, the colors held. Wash after wash, year after year, the red stayed red, the blue stayed blue, the print stayed bright. Salt works as a mordant, a substance that bonds the dye molecule more permanently to the fiber. In commercial textile dyeing, mordants are applied during the manufacturing process to ensure the dye fixes properly to the fabric. In home dyeing and in the care of commercially dyed fabrics, salt performs a similar function. The sodium ions in the salt solution interact with the dye molecules that have not fully bonded during manufacturing and help drive them more deeply and permanently into the fiber structure. For any deeply colored fabric, reds, navies, dark greens prone to bleeding, a salt soak before the first wash still performs exactly as it always did. The table salt cost a penny. The color it preserved was the color that made the dress worth buying. Number 10. Hair conditioner for wool. The discovery that made hand washing foolproof. A new bar of ivory soap, or a tiny amount of whatever gentle soap was available, dissolved in cool water to wash the wool garment. Then a thorough rinse. Then, into the final rinse water, a small amount of hair conditioner, the same conditioner she used on her own hair. The wool soaked in it for 5 minutes. She squeezed, never wrung, never twisted, the water out and rolled the garment in a clean, dry towel to remove the excess moisture before laying it flat to dry. Wool fiber is protein, specifically the protein keratin, the same protein that makes up human hair. The conditioner designed for hair is designed for keratin. It contains cationic surfactants that smooth the surface of the protein fiber, reducing the microscopic scale-like projections on each strand that catch against neighboring strands and cause felting and shrinkage. It leaves the fiber slightly lubricated, which is why hair-conditioned hair feels softer and more manageable. And it leaves wool fiber feeling the same way, and behaving the same way, and lasting dramatically longer. She did not know the word cationic. She knew that wool washed with a little conditioner in the rinse came out softer and held its shape better than wool washed without it. A wool jumper or a cashmere cardigan that came out of the wash as soft and as sized as it went in. That was the evidence. That was enough. Number 9. Laying wool flat to dry. The rule that every modern wardrobe has forgotten. After washing and rolling in a towel to remove excess water, the wool garment was carried to a flat surface, a clean, dry towel spread on a table, on the guest bed, on a rack placed across the bath. It was laid flat and shaped by hand into its correct dimensions while still damp. The collar laid flat, the sleeves positioned straight, the body smoothed to its proper width at the shoulder and the hem. Then it was left, completely undisturbed, until it was dry. Wool fiber when wet is at its most vulnerable. The protein chains that give wool its structure have relaxed in the water and become temporarily plastic, capable of being reshaped by gravity or tension. A wet wool garment hung by its shoulders will stretch at the shoulders and the underarms as the weight of the water pulls the fabric downward. The garment that dries hanging is not the garment that went into the wash. It is a longer, narrower, distorted version of it, and it will not recover its shape when dry because the fibers have set in the new position. The flat towel took 30 seconds to lay out. The shaped garment took 2 minutes to position. The garment that came off that towel 24 hours later was the garment she had bought, not a casualty. The actual garment in its actual size, ready to wear. Number 8. The brown paper bag iron, the technique that saved a generation of wool and velvet. She never placed a hot iron directly on the face of a wool garment or a velvet or a heavy crepe. The iron went on a piece of brown paper bag, cut flat, dampened slightly, placed over the fabric. The iron pressed the paper. The steam and heat passed through into the fabric beneath. The wool was pressed without the iron ever making direct contact with the fiber surface. The shine that appears on wool and velvet when they are ironed directly is called glazing. It happens when the heat of the iron flattens and fuses the surface fibers of the fabric, compressing the microscopic loops and crimps in the wool fiber into a smooth, reflective surface that catches light like a mirror. It is permanent. No amount of steaming or brushing will fully restore the nap once it has been glazed. The garment does not look pressed. It looks worn out. It looks cheap. And the iron is the thing that made it look that way. Paper is a poor conductor of heat. It slows the transfer of the iron's temperature to the fabric surface and prevents the localized overheating that causes glazing. The slight dampness generates steam that relaxes the fibers. She pressed every wool garment through a paper bag. Not one developed shine. Number 7. Cedar in every drawer. The fragrance that was actually a fortress. A cedar block in every drawer. A cedar ring on every hanger holding a wool garment. A cedar chest at the foot of the bed where the good woolens went through summer. Not for the smell, though the smell was pleasant and clean and unmistakably right. For what the smell was doing. Because what the smell was doing was killing moths. Cedar wood contains aromatic oils, primarily cedrine and cedral, that are toxic to moth larvae at the concentrations found in fresh cedar. The larvae of the clothes moth are the actual destructive agent in a moth-damaged garment. The adult moth does not eat fabric. It lays eggs in the fabric, and it is the larvae that hatch from those eggs and feed on the keratin in wool, cashmere, and silk that cause the holes. Cedar oil, at sufficient concentration, kills the larvae and repels the egg-laying female moths before the cycle can begin. She bought cedar blocks for a few cents each and refreshed them with fine sandpaper every season to renew the oil concentration. A cedar chest held the good woolens every summer for decades. Not a single moth hole. The chest was not a sentiment, it was a system. The understanding that prevention costs less than repair ran through everything she owned. Number 6. Woolens in cotton pillowcases, never plastic, through summer storage. When the heavy woolens went away for summer, the wool coat, the tweed skirt, the good cashmere cardigan, they were clean, aired, brushed, and then placed inside clean white cotton pillowcases before going into the cedar chest or the high wardrobe shelf. Not in plastic bags, not in dry cleaning bags, not sealed in anything that did not breathe. Cotton pillowcases that allowed the fiber to breathe through the months of storage while still protecting the garment from light, from dust, and from the wandering moth. Plastic is the enemy of stored natural fiber. It traps moisture against the fabric, creating exactly the damp microclimate that moth larvae and mildew require. A wool coat stored in a dry cleaning bag through a humid summer will emerge in September with a smell no amount of airing will remove, and occasionally with the tiny holes that mean the moths found it anyway. She placed a cedar block inside the case with the garment and pinned a small paper label to the outside so she knew what was inside without opening them. The system cost nothing beyond the pillowcases she already owned. The garments came out of storage in September the same as they went in, clean, shaped, undamaged, and ready. Number 5. Mending immediately. The philosophy that made a garment last forever. The moment she noticed a thin place in the elbow of a cardigan, not a hole, a thin place, she picked up the darning needle and the matching wool, and she darned it. That evening. Not when the hole appeared. Now, while the thin place was still intact, while the surrounding threads could still anchor the repair, while the mending would be invisible. Darning is the reinforcement of weakened fabric by weaving new thread through and across the existing thread in a grid pattern, building a new layer of fiber over the thinning area that restores its original weight and strength. Done early, while the threads are thin but not broken, the darn is nearly invisible. The new thread fills in the gaps between the loosening original threads, and the surface of the fabric looks whole. Done late, after the hole has opened, the edges of the hole have frayed, and the surrounding threads have weakened under the stress of the gap. The darn is visible and structural, and the fabric around it continues to weaken. She kept a darning mushroom in the mending basket beside her chair, wool threads in the colors of every garment she owned, a needle fine enough to pass between threads without splitting them. The mending basket was not a place where damaged things waited. It was a place where small problems went before they became large ones. That distinction made the difference between a wardrobe that lasted decades and one that wore out. Number 4. Inside out under the iron, the detail that kept dark fabric dark. Dark garments, the navy dress, the black wool skirt, the deep brown crepe blouse, were turned inside out before ironing. The iron pressed the inside face of the fabric. The outside face, the face that the world saw, was never touched by the iron directly. The result was a garment that came off the ironing board perfectly pressed and that held its color with none of the faint lightening and dulling that direct iron contact eventually produced on dark fabric. Heat applied directly to dark dye causes glazing, a slightly lighter, duller patch where the fiber has been compressed, and direct thermal degradation of the dye molecule, where sustained heat breaks down the dye compound and permanently lightens it. Neither effect is dramatic in a single ironing. Accumulated over 20 or 30 ironings, the effect is unmistakable. She turned every dark garment inside out before she set it on the ironing board. 2 seconds, every time. The navy dress she wore to church in 1941 was still navy in 1955, because she had ironed it inside out for 14 years. That is the arithmetic of small, correct habits. 2 seconds twice a month for 14 years. The difference between a dress that lasts and one that fades. Number 3. The razor blade pill remover, the tool that restored what the washing machine took. A double-edged safety razor blade drawn at a shallow angle across the surface of a pilled wool garment with the lightest possible pressure. The blade caught the tiny fiber balls, the pills that formed at points of friction, the underarms, the cuffs, and removed them cleanly. The fabric surface underneath was smooth and even, exactly as it was when the garment was new. Pilling is what happens to the short fiber ends on the surface of a knit or woven fabric when they are agitated against other surfaces and against each other. The short fibers work free of the yarn, tangle together in small balls, and hold to the fabric surface by the one end that remains anchored in the weave. A pilled garment looks worn and tired regardless of how structurally sound it is. The pill is a surface problem only. Remove the pill, and the garment looks new. She held the fabric taut over her hand and drew the blade across it with the lightness of touch that distinguishes a woman who knows what she is doing. The blade cut the pill at the point where the tangled ball met the fabric surface, leaving the anchored end secure in the weave. 4 minutes over a pilled cardigan produced a garment that looked as though it had just come out of its wrapping. The cardigans lasted 15 years and looked good for every one of them. Number 2. Off the chair and onto the hanger, the rule that cost nothing and saved everything. She did not leave clothes on the chair, not overnight, not while she decided what to wear tomorrow, not when she came home tired and the chair was closer than the wardrobe. The moment she removed a garment, she made the decision. It went to the laundry, or it went to air on the hanger, or it went back into the wardrobe. The chair was not an option. The chair had never been an option. A garment left on a chair is being damaged invisibly. Weight compresses fibers. Creases set overnight in fabric that was warm from the body and then cooled under tension. Wool dries in whatever shape it has been left. The collar that has drooped over a chair back for 3 nights does not spring back. It has been reshaped by gravity and time. The garment hung correctly on a hanger shaped for it, a padded hanger for the wool coat, a wooden hanger for the blouses, a clip hanger for the skirts, was being rested and shaped simultaneously. Gravity pulled the fabric into its correct line. Air circulated around it. By morning, it was ready. The chair was for sitting. She was very clear about this. Number 1. The cold water final rinse. 2 minutes that closed the fiber and set the shape. Every hand-washed garment after its final soap rinse went into one last basin of cold water. Plain cold water. Not cool, cold. The garment was submerged, gently moved through the water, and then removed. It was rolled in a towel, never wrung, and treated according to its fiber type from there. This last step cost nothing and added 2 minutes to the process, and it is the step that most people skip, and the step that explains why their hand-washed garments do not look as good as their grandmothers did. Hot and warm water open the scales on protein fibers, wool, silk, cashmere, making the fibers swell and become temporarily permeable. This openness is what allows soap to penetrate and clean. It is also what allows the fiber to felt and shrink if it is agitated while in this open state. The cold water final rinse closes those scales. The fiber contracts slightly back toward its natural diameter. The structure of the knit or weave tightens fractionally. The garment holds its shape as it dries because the fibers have been signaled to return to their resting position. She did it because her mother showed her that cold water at the end made the garment come out right, and warm water made it come out wrong, and that was sufficient. The garment that had been correctly rinsed looked, when dry, like the garment she had put into the water. Not a version of it, the actual garment. That is all the proof she needed. 13 tricks. Not one required a special product or a trip to a specialty store. They required a cedar block, a clothes brush, a razor blade, a wooden hanger, and the belief that a garment worth wearing once was worth wearing 100 times more. These women did not have more clothes than we do. They had fewer. That was precisely why they knew how to take care of them. When you own 12 garments and they have to last 10 years, you learn what they need. You pick up the darning needle before the hole opens. You lay the wool flat. You turn the dark dress inside out before the iron comes near it. They were ahead of a disposable culture that convinced an entire civilization that the correct response to a worn garment is to replace it. Every cedar chip and every brush stroke and every cold water rinse was a quiet refusal to throw away what could be kept, to replace what could be repaired, to forget what had taken generations to learn. If you want more forgotten wisdom from the generations who came before us, the next video is waiting for you right now.